Chapter 5 of The Corner House Girls by Grace Brooks Hill. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Fortune. Getting Acquainted. By the third day after their arrival in Milton, the Kenway sisters were quite used to their new home, but not to their new condition. "It's just delightful," announced Agnes. "I'm going to love this old house, Ruth. And to run right out of doors when one wants to, with an apron on and without fixing up, nobody to see one." The rear premises of the old corner house were surrounded by a tight fence and a high straggling hedge. The garden and backyard made a playground which delighted Tess and Dot. The latter seemed to have gotten over her first awe of the big house, and had forgotten to ask further questions about the meaning of the mysterious word spooky. Tess and Dot established their dolls and their belongings in a little summer house in the weed-grown garden, and played there contentedly for hours. Ruth and Aggie were working very hard. It was as much as Aunt Sarah would do if she made her own bed and brushed up her room. "When I lived at home before," she said grimly, "there were plenty of servants in the house. That is, until Father Storer died and Peter became the master." Mr. Howbridge came on this day and brought a visitor, which surprised Ruth. "This is Mrs. McCall, Miss Kenway," said the lawyer, who insisted upon treating Ruth as quite a grown-up young lady. "Mrs. McCall is a widowed lady for whom I have a great deal of respect," continued the gentleman, smiling, "and I believe you girls will get along nicely with her." I am glad to meet Mrs. McCall," said Ruth, giving the widow one of her friendly smiles, yet she was more than a little puzzled. "Mrs. McCall," said Mr. Howbridge, "will take many household cares off your shoulders, Miss Kenway. She is a perfectly good housekeeper, as I know," and he laughed, "for she has kept house for me. If you girls undertook to take care of even a part of this huge house, you would have no time for anything else." "But," began Ruth, in amazement, not to say panic. "You will find Mrs. McCall just the person whom you need here," said Mr. Howbridge, firmly. She was a strong-looking, brisk woman with a pleasant face, and Ruth did like her at once, but she was troubled. "I don't see, Mr. Howbridge, how we can afford anybody to help us just now," Ruth said. "You see, we have so very little money, and we already have borrowed from you, sir, more than we can easily repay." "Ha! You do not understand," said the lawyer quickly. "I see. You think that the money I advanced before you left Bloomingburg was a loan." "Oh, sir," gasped Ruth, "we could not accept it as a gift. It would not be right." "I certainly do admire your independence, Ruth Kenway," said the gentleman, smiling. "But do not fear. I am not lending you money without expecting to get full returns. It is an advance against your uncle's personal estate." "But suppose his will is never found, sir?" cried Ruth. "I know of no other heirs of the late Mr. Storer. The court recognizes you girls as the legatees in possession. There is not likely to be any question of your rights at all, but we hope the will may be found, and thus a suit in Chancery be avoided." But is it right for us to accept all this and spend money and all that when there is still this uncertainty about the will?" demanded Ruth, desperately. "I certainly would not advise you to do anything that was wrong either legally or morally," said Mr. Howbridge gravely. "Don't you worry. I shall pay the bills. You can draw on me for cash within reason." "Oh, sir!" "You will probably need new clothing, and some little luxuries to which you have not been always accustomed. I think I must arrange for each of you girls to have a small monthly allowance. It is good for young people to learn how to use money for themselves." "Oh, sir!" gasped Ruth again. The possibility of some other person or persons putting in a claim to Mr. Peter Stowe's estate must be put out of your mind, Miss Kenway, pursued the kindly lawyer. You have borne enough responsibility for a young girl already. Forget it, as the boys say. Remember, you girls are very well off. You will be protected in your rights by the court. Let Mrs. McCall take hold and do the work, with such assistance as you girls may wish to give her. It was amazing, but very delightful. "Why, Ruthie!" cried Agnes, when they were alone, fairly dancing around her sister. "Do you suppose we are really going to be rich?" To Ruth's mind, a very little more than enough for actual necessities was wealth for the Kenways. She felt as though it were too good to be true. To lay down the burden of responsibilities which she had carried for 2 years, well, it was a heavenly thought. Milton was a beautiful old town with well-shaded streets and green lawns. People seemed to have plenty of leisure to chat and be sociable. They did not rush by you without a look or a word as they had in Bloomingburg. "So you're the corner house girls, are you? Do tell," said one old lady on Willow Street, who stopped the Kenway sisters the first time they all trooped to Sunday school. "Let's see, you favour your father's folks," she added, pinching Agnes's plump cheek. "I remember Leonard Kenway very well indeed. He broke a window for me once, years ago, when he was a boy. I didn't know who did it, but Lenny Kenway never could keep anything to himself, and he came to me and owned up. Paid for it, too, by helping saw my winter's wood." And the old lady laughed gently. "I'm Mrs. Adams. Come and see me, corner house girls," she concluded, looking after them rather wistfully. "It's been many a day since I had young folks in my house." Already Agnes had become acquainted with a few of the storekeepers, for she had done the errands since their arrival in Milton. Now they were welcomed by the friendly Sabbath school teachers, and soon felt at home. Agnes quickly fell in love with a bronze-haired girl with brown eyes who sat next to her in class. This was Eva Larry, and Aggie confided to Ruth that she was just lovely. They all, even the little girls, strolled about the paths of the parade ground before returning home. This seemed to be the usual Sunday afternoon promenade of Milton folk. Several people stopped the corner house girls, as they were already known, and spoke kindly to them. Although Leonard Kenway and Julia Stowe had moved away from Milton immediately upon their marriage, and that had been 18 years before, many of the residents of Milton remembered the sisters' parents, and the corner house girls were welcomed for those parents' sake. "We certainly shall come and call on you," said the minister's wife, who was a lovely lady, Ruth thought. "It is a blessing to have young folk about that gloomy old house." "Oh, we don't think it gloomy at all," laughed Ruth. When the lady had gone on, the Larry girls said to Agnes, "I think you're awfully brave. I wouldn't live in the old corner house for worlds." "Why not?" asked Agnes, puzzled. "I guess you don't know how nice it is inside." "I wouldn't care if it was carpeted with velvet and you ate off of solid gold dishes," exclaimed Eva Larry with emphasis. "Oh, Eva, you won't even come to see us?" "Of course I shall. I like you, and I think you are awfully plucky to live there." "What for? What's the matter with the house?" demanded Agnes in wonder. "Why, they say such things about it. You've heard them, of course." "Surely you're not afraid of it because old Uncle Peter died there?" "Oh, no, it began long before your Uncle Peter died," said Eva, lowering her voice. "Do you mean to say that Mr. Howbridge, nor anybody, has not told you about it?" "Goodness me, no!" cried Agnes. "You give me the shivers." "I should think you would shiver, you poor dear," said Eva, clutching at Aggie's arm. "You oughtn't to be allowed to go there to live. My mother says so herself. She said she thought Mr. Howbridge ought to be ashamed of himself." "But what for?" cried the startled Agnes. "What's the matter with the house?" "Why, it's haunted," declared Eva solemnly. "Didn't you ever hear about the corner house ghost?" "Oh, Eva," murmured Agnes, "you are fooling me." "No, ma'am, I'm not. A ghost. Yes, everybody knows about it. It's been there for years. But we haven't seen it. You wouldn't likely see it yet, unless it was the other night when the wind blew so hard. It comes only in a storm." "What? The ghost?" "Yes, in a big storm it is always seen looking out of the windows." "Goodness," whispered Agnes. "What windows?" "In the garret. I believe that's where it is always seen, and of course it is seen from outside. When there is a big wind blowing, people coming across the parade here, or walking on this side of Willow Street, have looked up there and seen the ghost fluttering and beckoning at the windows." "How horrid!" gasped Agnes. "Oh, Eva, are you sure?" "I never saw it," confessed the other, "but I know all about it. So does my mother. She says it's true." "Mercy! And in the daytime?" "Sometimes at night. Of course, I suppose it can be seen at night because it is phosphorescent. All ghosts are, aren't they?" I never saw one," quavered Agnes, "and I don't want to." "Well, that's all about it," said Eva, with confidence, "and I wouldn't live in the house with a ghost for anything." "But we've got to," wailed Agnes. "We haven't any other place to live." "It's dreadful," sympathized the other girl. "I'll ask my mother. If you are dreadfully frightened about it, I'll see if you can't come and stay with us." This was very kind of Eva, Agnes thought. The story of the corner house ghost troubled the 12-year-old very much. She dared not say anything before Tess and Dot about it, but she told the whole story to Ruth that night, after they were in bed and supposed the little girls to be asleep. "Why, Aggie," said Ruth calmly, "I don't think there are any ghosts. It's just foolish talk of foolish people. Eva says her mother knows it's true. People have seen it." "Up in our garret?" "Oh, in the garret of this old house, yes," groaned Agnes. "Don't call it our house. I guess I don't like it much, after all." "Why, Aggie, how ungrateful!" "I don't care. For all of me, Uncle Peter could have kept his old house if he was going to leave a ghost in the garret." "Hush, the children will hear you," whispered Ruth. End of chapter 5. Recording by Leanne Fortune.